I think the real challenge for Australian rugby is how do you keep guys in Australia when you do have this overseas money and carrot sort of dangling around. Point in your career where you can, stay here and chase the Wallabies jersey like Ferg could have, or you can go overseas for a couple of years and, set yourself up for that next step in life, which is also pretty important. So, we've got to get creative because we've heard a few times that Australia doesn't have the depth or the depth of talent, which I think is a load of rubbish. If you look at how many Aussies are playing around the world, well, we definitely produce enough. You look, Zach Holmes has been at Toulouse, one of the best rugby clubs in France for 5-6 years. He was at the Force here. Jakey McIntyre's heading overseas now, another 10. Fergus Lee Warner, these guys. So how do we get creative as a sport and industry to keep them within the game and keep it competitive? If the Wallabies carrot's not there, is it the next step? How do we help them with that or anything like that? I think that would help. We could get all your tax back. That would be awesome.
Let them go and just sign NRL players. I think that's the way to go.
Shut up, J-Ball.
Too late. I just think we got whether that's through opportunities in business or whatever it may be, coaching. But we obviously can't compete with the money. So how do we get creative around that space? Is the question in my mind.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you, Sitch. I think there's a huge space that hasn't been explored yet to do exactly that, and is to keep our guys here. There's in New Zealand they talk about the carrot of playing for the All Blacks. The Wallabies jersey, unfortunately, just doesn't have that same pull. And I've asked a few people that question. It'd be interesting to get your insights, Sitch. And you lent on it before. If there was, you talk about ways of keeping guys in the game. Like, do you identify guys earlier? Well, you don't really need to identify. Do you create a program where current players are then exposed to different businesses, different industries? Maybe it's part of, they get a day off, or in your pre-season, off-season, you're doing a bit of time to learn about different businesses. Do you think if there was a proper structure around that and looking guys off the field, would that be a big enough pull to keep guys in the game and stray them away from taking the cash and going overseas?
Yeah, it would definitely be a carrot at the end of the day. Like if there's a formalised structure to be like, here's a pathway into this, whether it be business or, if we end up under 25s and guys can go and coach in that for experience or whatever it may be. If there's a formalised structure, or you start having flexibility around, okay, if you want to take a injury contract that comes up overseas or things like that in the off season when it's not Super Rugby, everyone sort of benefits in that regard. And Australia's one of the best countries to live in the world, obviously.
Yeah, so, exactly.
I think definitely a formalised structure would help. And, just give guys that might not want to go overseas or have partners that have careers here that don't want to give it up. Or, there's a lot of things there that can sort of work out. So, I definitely think a formalised structure in some capacity would definitely help in that regard. Maybe you can lead that DOS, the revolution.
Yeah, man. I'd love to. I just think there's a huge opportunity. And then, people talk about, the money overseas and whatever. And having done that, having gone to France for a year while the wife was pregnant, my eldest kid was born over there, and then spending the last 3 years in Japan, well, not the last 3, but the last 3 of my career, like going overseas and living overseas, it's not all it's cracked up to be, right?
It's a slog.
Oh, man, it's an absolute slog. And depending on the team that you go to, like I went to Honda and their sort of recruitment plan, it was fairly young. So the guys that came over, we had R.G. Snyman, Jack Debrasini, were all single guys. And I had Beck, my wife, and my 2 kids. And for her, mate, it was the most terrible 6 months of her life because she was just cooped up in our little apartment with 2 little kids, had no other expats over there to talk to. The kindy, like obviously everyone speaks a different language, so it's not all it's cracked up to be. So I just think if there's something outside of rugby that you can entice the guys to stay, there's going to be huge value there that can be created, and maybe I will lead some sort of revolution. Thanks, Sitch. Putting ideas in my head.
Good stuff, Dos.
And it was great to hear him talk about how he actually does want to be involved in the game after he's done. Because, I mentioned, I think when we were talking about Benny Moen a few weeks ago, getting more guys coming into coaching, but having guys, and he's in an interesting position where I reckon he'd be sitting over there sort of just soaking in everything Twiggy Forrest has to say and what he's doing and how he runs a business. And so there'll be so much value in keeping a guy like
Mate,
Ian involved in the game.
A brilliant idea that you like, whilst you've actively got players that are in the setup, actively sort of teach them the principles of running a sports administration or working within the sporting community. Like,
yeah, I mean...
Why not?
Yeah.
There's money to be made. There's business to be had. So I guess it's a very smart thing to be looking beyond the career as well, because then it becomes, as you said, a carrot that can hopefully lure them back to the game here in Australia.
And you just have to, J-Ball. Like, you just have to. And the kids need to understand at a younger age that they need to get that off the field side to their life sorted. They need to have interest. No matter, not everyone wants.
Like one serious injury and your career could be over.
Yeah, that's it. Not everyone wants to go and do a degree, so it might be chipping away at a trade. We have a lot of islanders in the game, so it might be creating that connection with doing some youth work through the church groups, and it could be anything. Just having some interest out of the game that you're consistently working on. So when the day comes that you're no longer playing rugby, it's not your whole identity, and you're not, I just hear about so many guys who suffer tough transition because all they knew was rugby, all they identified was with rugby. And just to have an outlet and not identifying yourself as a rugby player, just as a person who's really good at playing rugby and enjoying it in that way, there's so much value and so many benefits to go with that.